On the 21st of July 2023, two worried friends arrived at the home of Sharon Gordon, concerned by the lack of contact from her that day. Knocking on the door of her home, their concerns began to grow when they received no answer, and so the pair made their way around to the back door. Finding it unlocked, they decided to enter the home, and as they did, they were met by a scene of sheer horror. For there, on the floor, at the foot of the stairs, was Sharon Gordon, lying motionless and face down in a pool of her own blood, with it being obvious to the ladies that this was the result of foul play. This is the story of Sharon Gordon, an innocent grandmother whose only wish was for her builder to finally complete the work he had been carrying out on her home. Hello and welcome to the Diary of Madmen and Monsters, where we talk about the mad men, women and monsters that inhabit our society, covering well-known and not so well-known cases across the UK and beyond. And if you're the type of person who often finds themselves saying, sorry, I can't come out tonight, I already have plans, and those plans are actually just watching true crime documentaries at home, then you're in the right place and you're going to fit in well. Now, let's get ready, because it's time for more true crime. On the 20th of July 2023, builder Peter Norgrove had called in at a job he was working on in the Hollyhall area of Dudley in the West Midlands. Cheerfully, he started working on an internal doorway, whilst the homeowner and her friends discussed the work that had been completed by him just out of earshot in another area of the house. Once the homeowner's friends had left, Peter stopped what he was doing and put on a pair of red gloves, and then moved inside of the home, picking up a lump hammer as he did. Suddenly, an 18-second scream can be heard from inside the property, along with 8 audible thuds, and then just minutes later, Peter Norgrove left the home, began to pack up his car and made his way to his own home, to carry on his day as normal, leaving a swathe of destruction and murder in his wake. So, let's start at the beginning and watch as this truly brutal tale unfolds. Sharon Gordon was a 58-year-old hard-working and trusting woman. A loving mother and grandmother, she lived in Dudley in the West Midlands and was a devout Jehovah's Witness community member, known for her kindness, generosity and strong faith. The mother of two was seen as a pillar of her community, someone that her friends and family looked up to as a strong role model and confidant. In 2022, Miss Gordon had been searching for a builder to complete some minor building work on her home, rebuilding and repairing a fence in her garden. Through mutual friends at her Kingdom Hall, she was introduced to Peter Norgrove, a newly qualified builder who had recently retrained after losing his job, and she gave him the job to mend her fence, which she had expressed that she was incredibly pleased with. So pleased, in fact, that when she decided that she next wanted a small ground floor extension to house a bathroom on the side of her house, she approached Peter and asked him to quote for the job. Initially, Peter's quote came in at £32,000, but after Ms. Gordon refused to pay this price, stating the quote was unaffordable for her, Peter reworked his quote, taking out some of the external labour costs in an effort to ensure he would get the job and use it as social proof to market his talents in his new career. The new price they settled upon was £29,000, and Miss Gordon was much happier with this price, and so accepted his quotation, asking him when he could start the work and how long it would take. Peter, who it is worth mentioning at this point had never completed an extension before, told Sharon he could start the job on April the 4th, 2022, and that the project should last approximately 4 to 6 weeks, with £18,000 of the money needing to be paid up front, and the rest of the money being paid in instalments across the project timeline. Upon agreeing that these terms were acceptable, the pair signed a contract, and on the 4th of April, work commenced on the build. Peter Norgrove was a 43-year-old dad of three from Oxfordshire who had moved to Dudley years earlier and was described as a family man and someone who was a well-respected member of his local Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall. An ex-prison officer and environmental health officer, Peter had decided to retrain as a builder in 2021 after losing his then job as an environmental health officer, hoping to launch a new and more lucrative career in the building trade. Peter was seen as a highly trustworthy and honest member of his Kingdom Hall, the very same Kingdom Hall that Sharon Gordon was also a trusted member of. And so, Sharon believed that she could trust him to complete the job on time and to a high standard. However, unfortunately for Sharon, the build would not go quite as planned. Almost as soon as the project began, red flags began to appear, with the unemployed Ms. Gordon watching closely as Peter began the work. Ms. Gordon, who kept a record of the progress made by Norgrove in a calendar, noted how on one occasion Peter had failed to rent a digger, forcing him to have to dig out foundations by hand, extending the work and time needed to complete that part of the project. She also recorded that Norgrove would often arrive late to work and sit in his car for hours on his phone, as well as when he failed to work full days on the project, recording how each lapse in professionalism and project management was costing time and often money on the job. By March 29, 2023, Sharon had paid more than £25,000 to Norgrove in the instalments agreed in their contract, but could see that progress was well behind where it should have been. And when he requested another payment of £3,000, she decided to install a CCTV camera to enable her to monitor more closely the work that Peter was doing, as well as voice her concerns, pointing out that work was severely behind schedule and that all work needed to be halted as it emerged that a building inspection was required, something that she noted Peter Norgrove had failed to mention. Peter responded that her response to his request for more money had left him feeling like she was branding him a thief. And it was clear to both parties at this point that the trust Sharon had in the beginning was quite rapidly beginning to decline. And when scheduled finish dates came and went, that trust was only eroded further. This resulted in a feeling of disappointment and frustration from Sharon towards Peter, with Peter then feeling the need to defend himself, sending her a long message in October explaining how he had been forced to work in the rain with little shelter and that he had been taking chances with his health. He also said, "Can I just respectfully ask that you speak to me respectfully? I feel you talk down to me and talk over me when I'm trying to explain things to you. I want to get your extension finished as soon as possible and for both of us to move on as brother and sister." An inspection in November then poured more petrol on the flames of their quickly eroding relationship, when the inspector highlighted several issues with Norgrove's poor workmanship, with Peter appearing dismissive of the advice given to him. The pair's relationship soured further again when Ms. Gordon requested in January 2023 that Norgrove pay her £473 that she claimed she was now out of pocket by, with Norgrove further adding to her frustration when he began to finish work early to collect his children from school. Come June 2023, Miss Gordon's faith in Peter Norgrove was at an all-time low, and when she managed to secure a role as an accounts assistant, which would require her to visit the office 3 days per week, she would refuse to give Peter a key, meaning he would have to complete any work he had left to do on the home on the 2 days she was home during the week. And, putting further barriers in place, Sharon said that any noisy work that needed to be completed would have to be done outside, as she would have to work from her home on those days. At one point, it was also noted that Sharon had gone to Australia to visit family members during the construction and refused to allow Peter entry to her house when she was away. It's clear to see that tensions were high between the pair, with hostilities increasing due to the frustrations being shown by both parties. And in early July, just over a fortnight before her death, With the project now having taken 12 months longer than reasonably expected, Sharon had sent Norgrove a message, lamenting about the time he had been taking on this 2-month extension, which she attributed in a large part to his lax timekeeping. Norgrove, however, continued to offer only excuses, and with friends telling Sharon to fire him, whether out of frustration or simply down to her forgiving nature, she decided to let Peter carry on with the job, in the hope that he would finish it sooner rather than later. On the morning of the 20th of July 2023, Sharon Gordon picked up her phone and sent a WhatsApp message to builder Peter Norgrove, referring to a conversation they had previously had, in which he had accepted damaging a radiator whilst installing it, and had agreed to repay £100 to replace it. Miss Gordon had then logged on to work from home before Norgrove arrived at her home, greeting her after pressing her Ring doorbell. Placing a white dust sheet on the ground and taking equipment from his car, he then placed a pair of red rubber gloves on top of a container in the garden. Over the next 3 hours or so, footage captured at Sharon's home showed him working on a door in the garden and using a black and yellow hammer he had brought with him at times. Then, at around 12:50 p.m, 2 of Sharon Gordon's friends arrived for lunch, with the trio discussing the build as they looked on, with Sharon becoming critical of the builder's timekeeping and slow work rate. The group then moved away from Norgrove into the patio area and spoke for a while before the friends left just before 1:35 p.m. Approximately 10 minutes after Sharon's 2 friends had left the house, Norgrove began to clear away the items he was working on, and at just before 2 p.m, he put on the pair of red gloves he had earlier placed on the container. Making sure the gloves were on snug, Peter then turned away from his work and re-entered the home of Sharon, picking up the lump hammer he had sporadically used throughout the day as he did. Although exactly what happened next isn't completely clear, what it is believed happened is that after Peter had re-entered the home, the pair had had another altercation regarding Peter's work. Frustrated and angered by this, it is believed that Peter simply flipped, lost control and attacked Sharon in a spur-of-the-moment thing, frustrated by her constant monitoring and complaints regarding his work. How the altercation played out completely is not fully known, but what is absolutely certain is that Peter attacked Sharon with the lump hammer he had used during his work that day, bludgeoning her 8 times in total on the head as she lay on the floor, fracturing her skull and creating such immense damage to her brain that it would create a certain death scenario. And, upon finishing his brutal attack upon her, he simply left her where she lay to die. During the altercation that must have happened just 5 minutes after he re-entered the home, the Ring doorbell recorded noises lasting 18 seconds, which appeared to come from inside of the house. A female voice was heard screaming momentarily, and a number of banging sounds and shouting was also recorded. At approximately 2:20 p.m, Norgrove then hastily left the house, carrying a tool pouch with footage captured of him wiping his thigh with a white cloth while blood staining was seen on his leg and forearm. He then re-entered the house whistling and acting as if all was well and normal, carrying on tidying up the crime scene and putting his equipment away, before getting into his car, driving home to place his clothes into a washing machine, and then travelling to meet his wife at their daughter's school. Upon committing this evil crime, Peter, it was reported, was as calm and as level-headed as usual, according to his wife. Once they had collected their daughter, they then drove to his wife's parents' home, where he briefly left the car before returning to the car and driving home, with Peter later that evening showering and shaving before making his way to lead a service at his Kingdom Hall nearby, all the while putting on a display of being a normal, loving family man, and not in fact the evil murdering madman that he truly was. On the morning of the 21st of July, when Sharon Gordon failed to attend her work as usual and wasn't getting back to those trying to contact her, her friends began to grow worried. Making the decision to go and check on her, the pair arrived at her home and began to grow even more concerned when they couldn't get an answer from their friend. Deciding that they wouldn't leave until they found out what was going on, the pair moved around to the back garden, finding the back door unlocked and open, and so they decided to enter. And as they did, they walked into a scene of pure horror, finding their friend lying dead in a pool of her own blood at the foot of the stairs. Immediately, they contacted the emergency services, and upon attending the scene, paramedics confirmed that Sharon was dead, with a post-mortem showing that she had been viciously and brutally assaulted with a heavy object, leaving a 2-pound coin-sized hole in her head. With it being said that Sharon had most probably still been alive for up to an hour after the attack, but that she had most certainly passed from the injuries inflicted upon her the day previous. Immediately upon discovering Sharon's body, a police investigation was launched, with a post-mortem revealing she had suffered 8 blows to the head, which would have been severe. She also suffered multiple fractures, including to her skull and near her chin, while her cause of death was traumatic injury to her brain. Very quickly, they realised that Peter Norgrove, Sharon's builder, had been working on her home that day, and so contacted him to ask him if he knew anything at all about the murder. Interviewing Norgrove, he claimed that Sharon had been alive and well when he left the house, claiming that she had gone upstairs as he was leaving the property. However, as the police's investigation went on, a number of holes began to appear in his account of events that day, and by scrolling through hours of CCTV, they were able to retrace his steps before, during and after the murder, with police realising that his turn of events were not entirely accurate. For instance, he hadn't mentioned visiting his in-laws' house after leaving the school, causing the police to look further into the events of the visit to their home. And, upon doing so, they found undeniable evidence that Peter was responsible for the murder. After obtaining a warrant to search Peter's in-laws' property, a police search of the home ensued, with the initial searches conducted by officers revealing very little, until they decided to bring in the police canines, dogs who were trained to find incriminating scents such as drugs, cadavers and blood, with the dog immediately locating the lump hammer that had been used in the murder, after police had initially missed it due to the fact that Peter had cleaned it so well. As police continued their search, Peter's wife and mother-in-law approached them with a next bag that had Sharon's name and address on it, that they had found in the garden after they had become suspicious of Peter's movements on the day of the murder, remembering that he had visited the home momentarily as they made their way home from school. Upon analysing the contents, it was found to contain a red pair of gloves, a black bin bag, white towel and a sponge that were all covered in the blood and DNA of Sharon, as well as the DNA of Norgrove. After uncovering the clothing and the murder weapon, the police were certain that Peter was their murderer, and, knowing they now had enough evidence to make the case stick, on the 26th of July 2023, they arrested and charged him on suspicion of the murder of Sharon Gordon, with Peter, who realised that the sheer amount of evidence police had found meant his pleas of innocence were a non-starter, decided to plead guilty almost immediately. On Wednesday the 31st of January 2024, at a sentencing hearing at Wolverhampton Crown Court, Peter Norgrove was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 15 years in prison, with the judge, Michael Chambers KC, commenting, "This was a brutal and savage attack in the victim's home using a weapon. She would have been no match for you. You used a hammer, which you had quite deliberately taken into the house, together with gloves that you had on, for the purpose of killing her. You were angry because she had continued to criticise you for your chronic delay and workmanship." In interviews, Ms. Gordon's daughter, Rhian Brown, described Norgrove as a wolf in sheep's clothing, who had used the security net of being in the same congregation as his victim to hide behind who he really was. Rhian added that it doesn't make sense that Norgrove was given a minimum term of 15 years. "I don't know what this man thinks or believes, but it's not the same thing as my mother. When he comes out, he'll be younger than my mum was when he killed her, to live his life with his family. How is that justice? And as always, I want to offer Sharon's family and friends my deepest condolences. May Sharon rest in peace. And if you took something from this video, then you might also be interested in the video on screen now, where I showcase and discuss 14 evil murderers who were jailed in April 2024 for their heinous crimes. And as always, I'll see you in the next one, when it will once again be time for more true crime.